push not.
I actually put money in, I wasn't sure.
Are you ready? Okay, ready to go. Welcome, everybody, to the Rye-Town Park Commission meeting of September 20th, 2016. Please rise, and will Joan Feinstein lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Debbie, please call the roll.
Commissioner Julie Killian. Here. Commissioner Dennis Pilla.
Here.
Louis,
Marina.
Commissioner Louis Marino filling in for Dennis Pilla.
Yes, representing.
Representing, thank you. Commissioner Joseph Sack.
Here.
Commissioner Benedict Salanitro.
Here.
Commissioner Joan Feinstein representing Paul Rosenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Gary Zuckerman.
Here, thank you. Now, we have several members missing, and Mayor Sack was not here last time. Did you happen to have viewed the last meeting on television?
It's on my Netflix list, so not yet.
Actually, come to think of it, it's not going to be on television, is it? That was the one that we had technical difficulties, and it was, only the first part was recorded. Okay, so we will have to pass on the minutes until the next meeting when we have a full quorum of people who were here, hopefully.
Unintentional, of course.
I thought that was a very good meeting. I was very disappointed that that happened. Public comment. Before we get to any comments on the possible restaurant license, I'd like to save that comment for the period of time when we are actually considering that item on the agenda. So items other than those that appear on the agenda, may we have public comment on any other item? Yes, sir. And please, anybody making public comment, please state your name, address, and affiliation, if any.
Yes,
Thank
good
you.
evening. My name is Bill Bishalia. I'm 382 Milton Road, affiliated with Friends of Rye-Town Park. And I would just like to ask the board or the commission what the plan is for the next, say, 3 or 4 months as far as maintaining the park, as far as the crew size and what you plan on.
Well, I
taking
think
care
that the park will remain open. I'll let Terry, do you want to address that? Because basically the park is closing down. And do you want to just briefly address what our plans as a park director going forward?
Okay, after Labor Day, we started our postseason operation. As far as cashiers and fees, we've been collecting fees for parking during the week. The beach has been free. On the weekends, we've had lifeguards for the last 2 weekends, so we've charged not only for parking, but for beach access. That will stop on Sunday. What will happen on Sunday is after the triathlon, we won't be charging anymore. The beach gate will be open, and there'll be no charge for parking or to go on the beach. Pretty much right now, we're in the shutdown mode. Lifeguards, their last day was Saturday, this past Sunday. The lifeguard captain and one of his lifeguards will be in on Friday just to clean up medical supplies and put, normal supplies away. Other than that, all the boats, all the ropes are all secure and put away. Maintenance, our maintenance staff will be on through the first week of October as a full staff. Because the triathlon is so late this year, there's a lot of things that can't be done until after that's cleaned up on the 26th. After that, they'll leave 2 people on staff. They have to wait until Seaside Johnny's lets us know what day they're going to close, because the last thing that has to be done at the park is the water to be shut off. As far as security, as of September 30th, we'll have 1 security guard day and 1 security guard night until Thanksgiving. So as of right now, that's our postseason plan.
Thank you, Terry. Would anybody else?
I'd like to add to that, that as soon as the park maintenance staff goes off duty, our handyman and contractor, John Zicka, starts, and his crew is responsible for garbage pickup and maintaining, vigilance. We also have our caretaker from Rydtown Park, from Crawford Park. Part of his job is to patrol and not patrol, but take a watch over the property. So we get a report every night.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir? Oh, ma'am. Yes, how are you? I saw the hand, I didn't see the face with it.
Hi, Diane Horner, 129 Beach Avenue, Rhinebeck. I just wanted to say that I felt that this season at Oakland Beach, the ambience of the park was tremendous. And I just want to commend Terry and her staff. Everything seemed to work very well this summer. Even the bathhouse was cleaner, and the toilets, which was really an improvement. And all the parking, and even on crowded Sundays, went extremely smoothly. And there was no loud music from Seaside Johnny's every Sunday on the beach. And the pavilions seemed to have modified their, it was just a very peaceful, pleasant summer. And I just wanted to commend Terry and her staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure Terry and Debbie and Bill and all the staff really appreciate that. We have gotten a lot of positive comments on the season. Thank you so much, Ms. Horner. Anybody else comment from the public? If not, let's go to the park management report. Terry?
Hello. I can't believe it's over. I just want to say my goal for the season was to keep the park safe, clean, and for all to come and enjoy, and for the staff to work as a team for all of that to happen. And from all the things I've heard from people around the park, I feel I've achieved those goals. Thank you. I'm not going to go through postseason again. I went over what's going to be happening at the park. Right now, we're in the triathlon mode. The prep for that starts on Thursday, and it doesn't end until Sunday. So we're all working together to make sure that that's a safe event in the park also. As far as financials, the August figures were down $43,000 from last August. I feel that was due to the couple of weeks we had really hot and humid weather, lots of thunderstorms, where we basically had to close a lot midday because of the storms and didn't reopen. Year-to-date, as of August 31st, we're $104,725 ahead of 2015. And again, this is only strictly beach income. It has nothing to do with any other income. So I'm basing it just on our actual sales and transactions that go through the park. Labor Day weekend, Tropical Storm Hermine came in. We battened down hatches for something that really didn't happen, but it did affect the weekend. This weekend, this Labor Day weekend, we made $19,000, $19,082. Last Labor Day weekend, it was $61,026, so it was like $41,000 difference, which, brings our overall down. As of right now, we're like $39,000 behind last September.
Wait, I'm sorry, 39,000 year to date?
No, 39,000 for September.
That's
Just
just for
for
1 month.
September.
Yeah, year to date, if you take the
Oh,
year to
because-
date,
wow,
if you take
because of
the
Labor Day.
104,000 and minus what we've made, I'm getting right now, we're ahead only 65,696 rather than the 104. One of the things I want to thank Debbie especially and the commission for allowing Sullivan Data to work with us. on our network and our computers. We've had some problems with our hardware on our computers over the last month, and I can't tell you how their response time was amazing. We didn't lose a transaction being processed, and they've been really a welcome asset to us. In addition, I know they have a plan in effect for our network for next year that we'll be working with on the off-season and hoping that it'll be ready for installation in April. Right now, all our software, it has been and is being backed up daily. They'll be removing our computers on the 27th of the month. As far as maintenance, you all know the sculpture has been put in place, and people are going and looking at it. We planted grass where they dug up, so that's starting to grow. And just basically, they've been doing kind of a lot of painting and cement work. The building, if you come in now, the building that's to the left when you pull into parking was the bricks were all showing, and it was kind of falling apart. They cemented it, painted it, and it actually looks good. They've painted all the entrances to the park. And, you know, they've been really, good in trying to keep the park clean and following, you know, what I have asked them to do. And so I have to thank them. As far as security, our new ATV is registered. Our incidents in the park this year have gone down. I will tell you that we had a little incident on the 26th with a party that was for a baseball league, and there was damage to the fountain that had to be dedicated the next day. And thanks to our thanks to my staff, nobody even knew that it happened. I did speak to those people, and that won't be happening again. We're also looking for a way to, right now, there's a big electrical outlet that kind of sticks up next to the fountain. So we're kind of looking into how we can cover it up, and I know there's quite a few people working on that. As far as beach operations, Mark, was thrilled with how everyone behaved on the beach this year. You're still going to have your events, of people with heat exhaustion. And, we did have a few of those. Other than that, he is looking right now into some of the equipment that is old and putting a list together of what we can do to replace some of it. We were short-staffed in a few departments because of college kids going back, but we made it work. And I'm proud of everyone that actually took days off from their full-time job to come and cover, so that we could open. A lot of programs going on. We're working right now on Turkey Run in November. We're working with Playland and the New York Rangers to do a 5K run through the park in November. So we're still pretty busy. Pavilion rentals are still going. I still have 2 more parties. So, always the triathlon is almost as big of an event as the 4th of July. Other than that, that's what's been going on at the park.
Thank you, Terry. Any questions from the commissioners?
Excellent job, Terry.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
good
you
job.
very
and
much, Terry.
Congratulations on a great season. Thank you. Our next item is presentation regarding the proposed MSG and Rangers 5K run that Terry just mentioned. Please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Allback from Madison Square Garden.
And I'm Brian Miranda from Madison Square Garden.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. So we, in conjunction with our partner Northwell Health, who is a hospital, would like to put on a 5K race, starting in Playland and then continuing through the town park, along Dearborn, Forest Avenue, and back into Playland Park. The date is November 19th. You'll see the course here. We're working in conjunction with a company called Genesis Adventures. They run triathlons and multiple races. We're also working with a company called Chronotrack, who will manage all of our registration online. They're also work very closely with Genesis. Chronotrack does all the timing and registration for the New York City Marathon. The goal of the race is a family fun run. Our community of Rangerstown fans are family-oriented, and the goal with our hospital partner, Northwell Health, who owns 2 hospitals in Westchester County, Northern Westchester and Phelps Memorial, want to do a healthy, active event as a Rangers partner. In the packet, you'll see our proposed course race. We're working with Playland as well.
Page 18.
We've taken into consideration a number of things. The bird sanctuary, and we've worked with them so that we would cut off our run so we don't go into the sanctuary. We've taken into consideration some capital improvements that we've been notified by Playland that may take place along the North Boardwalk as well as around the bathhouse, so our route avoids those areas. And we've worked with Bill, lawyer, to map out the course that we have proposed here. The plan is to set up in the parking lot on the morning of the 19th at 6 a.m. with some potential pre-race Friday setup, meaning tents mainly. 6 a.m. setup, 8 a.m. all runners will be welcome to come pick up their packet registration. At 9 o'clock, we would do our pre-race warm-up and stretching, etc. And then 10 a.m., the first heat of 2 heats would go off. We'd have our faster runners go first, and then the family and children who want to participate in the run go second so that we don't have bottlenecking or anything. In talking with Bill, we are anticipating 1,200 runners. I know it says in here 1,200 to 1,500. We will have spectators. Most will stay in the parking lot area. And we've also proposed, we have additionally here one more piece that we can share with you that basically outlines our plan for our festival area in the parking lot at Playland, where we'd have food and beverage, working with the concessionaire, our tents, our safety tent, and things like that, as well as representation from our hospital partner.
Thank you. One question, is there any problem in getting from Playland to Rytown Park? That's,
Well, we hope that most people will drive because there is a good amount of parking. A lot of our fans do come from New York City, so we wanted to provide an option that they could take the train to Rye, and then depending on if we're allowed to do this, potentially set up a shuttle from Rye train station to Playland to accommodate those guests. But if that's something that we can't look at, then we would just ask everybody to drive.
I was actually referring, the course itself goes from Playland to Rytown Park.
Sure.
So is there any obstacle in getting from Playland to Rytown Park in your course?
So since we did a walkthrough with Genesis and they did not identify any problems with it, we would go along the boardwalk and enter into the park. I don't know exactly where I could point it out on the map, but there wasn't any obstacles that we saw.
All right, Bill's gonna,
Our Rye City Council members are probably aware of this, that the turkey run comes up from the Rye Rec Center through the pool parking lot and into Rytown Park, right at the pedestrian entrance between, Playland and Rytown Park. So this is a race that involves about 500 participants doing either a 2.5 mile or a 5 mile race. So it's been done many times. It's a little bit narrow, but by that time in the race, as is true with the Rye Rec Turkey Run, the race will have been going on for about 1.5 miles at that point. And so it'll be more spread out. So we don't anticipate any issues. And to get out of the park, rather than going to the very end of the pavilion and going downstairs, we'll be swinging around the paved area that brings you over by the main bulletin board and then out of the parking lot onto Dearborn.
okay, good. Joan, you had a question?
Yes, have you had any preliminary conversations with the Rice City Police?
Yes, our government affairs, Claire Dorfman, who couldn't join us today, has, and we also have a meeting next Monday with the police, the mayor, and a couple other folks in that to represent that piece. And also at that point too, we'd want to talk about the shuttle from the train station being, cognizant of where that might be able to pick up and drop off folks, and the same thing at Playland.
Thank you. Questions from the commissioners?
Are they gonna,
Penny?
do you anticipate any dignitaries from the New York Rangers drawing more of a crowd than the 1,200?
We're going to cut off the registration at 1,200. We could have some spectators. We are enlisting 6 of our alumni, our legends. I'll give you some examples of folks that we've reached out to. The Adam Graveses of the world, Brian Leach, et cetera. We will have some of them there. They will be part of the event in terms of being in the festival area. We might put some along the course just to cheer on fans. As you know, they're very involved with our organization and huge supporters of our members of Rangerstown.
Thank you.
Will
Anybody?
Mark Messier be there? That's all I want to know.
I'm sorry to say he will not be. We've also asked for a current player or two, because we know that several live in the town of Rye in the vicinity. They're on a very long road trip coming off the northern Canada, I believe, that week. So we don't know for sure about that. We will have security. We do bring our own security when we have alumni and players in attendance.
No, it's not until November 19th, so we have a little bit of time. All right, anybody else? Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Soul Riders. Do we have our next item is presentation regarding Soul Riders' proposed Tie the Town Pink Breast Cancer Awareness Campaign. And I see somebody in pink.
Hi, yes. I have this for you all. I don't know if you want it. Should I just put it somewhere? Or? And I brought this to leave with you. Oh, it does. Perfect. Okay. That's
So it's
fine.
different, it's a different one,
Might
that's
be
the
a little
notice,
different.
this is just explanation.
Oh, it's different. Do you have any more?
Could I have?
I do.
Okay. Sure.
Here you go.
Cedar Rye already put this, right?
Hello, my name is Lisa Dominici Ferries, and I'm here tonight with Susan Gennart to speak on behalf of Soul Riders, a volunteer-driven charitable organization based in Rye that since 2007 has been dedicated to empowering people in our community who are affected by cancer. And specifically, I'm here to announce our 3rd annual Tie the Town Pink Breast Cancer Awareness Campaign that launches October 1st and runs throughout the month of October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and specifically to request permission from the Rye Town Park Commission to once again adorn the trees and some lampposts and benches throughout Rye Town Park with these vibrant pink ribbons throughout the month of October. We have volunteers who hang these around town. We received permission recently from Rye City Council to adorn Purchase Street in downtown Rye. And we have actually a Girl Scout troop who's waiting in the wings to tie these hopefully throughout the park responsibly without harming the trees. And then during the first week of November, we're committed to removing all the ribbons throughout the park so they don't kind of linger. And this is an annual event that instills a sense of pride in the community to all those who experience it and participate in it. And the proceeds fund programs and services, Soul Rider programs and services that help and support people in our community with cancer. So it's a request that we can tie these throughout the park again for the month of October.
Thank you. I think that's an admirable charity and cause, myself, and we're aware that the city of Rye had already approved this. So unless we have further discussion?
I just want to say thank you to Lisa and Susan for doing this every year, and to Sandy Sandberg and all the ladies of Soul Riders, because it's such an amazing organization. And it started out as women getting together to walk in the Avon
Correct.
breast cancer walk, and has turned into, I don't even know how many years ago that was. It was a long time ago.
2006.
All right,
yeah,
so
was the
10 years
first one.
ago.
Yeah.
And it's now turned into this amazing grassroots organization, which has helped so many women in our community.
Thanks, Julie.
Deal
And I
with their
see you
cancer.
purchased your ribbons today, so
I did
thank you.
purchase my ribbons today.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion and a second, please?
Motion, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll-
you very
I'll leave
much.
this with you here.
Thank you very much. Our next item is presentation of our audit report. And we have our auditors, representatives from our auditors firm of, I know, O'Connor Davies.
Too tall. Thank you. My name is Scott Oling. I'm here with Jeff Shaver tonight. We are partners with the accounting firm O'Connor Davies, and we are here to present the results of the annual audit that we conducted for the Rye-Town Park for the year that ended December 31st of 2015. So we won't be talking about any of the numbers that were presented to you earlier tonight, regarding the current year's operations. That will be, next year's audit report. But I think there are some positive numbers that Jeff will point out to you that you will see from 2015. When you open up the audit report, the only part that belongs to us as the audit firm is following the pages following the table of contents, and that is the audit opinion. It's a two-page document on pages 1 and 2 of the audit report. And basically what this is it's telling you that we have issued what's known as an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion on the park's operations for the year, meaning that we believe that these financial statements fairly present what happened financially at the park during 2015. So I'm going to have Jeff take you through some of the numbers for the park's general fund, which is its only and primary fund, and he'll tell you, how you did compared to budget and where the numbers ended up for the year. Jeff.
Thank you, Scott. I'll jump right into the meat of the financial statements on pages 28 and 29. This is the general fund comparative schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, budget and actual. The page 28 has 2015 results, and page 29 has 2014 results. You'll see this is a 4-column presentation, with the first column being the original budget, the second column being the final budget encompassing any revisions during the year. The third column is the actual results, and the fourth column is the variance between the final budget and the actual results. You'll see total revenues were budgeted at $932,000. Actual revenues for the year were $1,092,000. That's a positive budgetary variance of $160,000. The way you achieved that variance was in parking fees, which had a positive budgetary variance of $88,000. And Northgate guests and Midgate guests for a combined positive budgetary variance of about $75,000. And also on the Southgate guests, approximately $21,000. And then moving down the lower half of the page, you'll see the expenditures. The original budget was $932,000. Actual expenditures for the year were $929,000. That's a positive budgetary variance of $3,300, which means, all said and done, you went over some of your line items that you had budgeted, came under on some others. You pretty much spent nearly 100% of your budget. But the good news is you didn't overspend. The only thing I can say is some of the lines were overspent, and you could, as you're going through the year, make revisions to your budget to cover those overexpended line items. What it comes down to, after you take the revenues of $1,092,000 less the expenditures of $928,000, you have an increase in your fund balance of $164,000, and that compares to a loss last year of $281. When the park has a deficiency or when revenues are less than expenses, the agreement is that the town and the city will contribute to the park to make up that difference. But because you have a surplus, there was no contributions required for the 2015 year end. So because you had no fund balance at the beginning of the year, your net income of $163,000 is your fund balance for the end of the year. It's $163,555. And just move back one page, page 27. I'll just highlight one item. There's an accounts receivable on the books, $63,000. It's for sales tax that's collected that the commission feels is due back from the state. We've set up an offsetting, what's called a deferred inflows of resources. It's similar to a liability of the same amount, $62,818, to indicate that that amount has not been collected as of the time of the audit, and not to indicate that it's not collectible at all, just to say has not been collected. It's just an availability situation. So the cash isn't in your hands. Is there a question?
Why do we get it back? I don't understand what it is.
Well, there was the feeling that you were paying sales tax, collecting sales tax, and didn't need to be. So there was filings with the state to get that money back. So this is a new item, that's why I'm highlighting it. It didn't occur in the past.
Because in the past, we paid it and we
Collected it and paid it.
collected it and paid
But
it.
with the new administration, there's the feeling that, no, we're exempt, that money should come back.
Let me just make a statement on that. When I was looking over the paperwork at the beginning of February, I noticed that the park had been paying sales tax and did not feel that it was proper. I'm actually surprised that it's, because that started in 2016, I'm actually surprised that it's in the 2015 audit statement. But we've requested the state of New York to give money back to us.
So where does the sales tax, what are we charging sales tax on?
Parking.
Just parking,
We're not charging,
permits?
no, let me rephrase that, The commission was never charging sales tax, but the commission, over the last 8 years, had been apparently remitting sales tax to the State of New York Department of Taxation and Finance. And I felt that that was improper and have requested a refund. So they're obviously putting that out as an accounts receivable. It's certainly very contingent.
So we continued to pay it, and now
No,
we think
we're
we're gonna
not
get, we
paying.
haven't paid it.
We're not, no. This administration has not paid it.
Okay.
What-
So I'm
what
just
is the
curious what the
status?
process you go
Yeah,
through if
what
you
is
just
the
decide.
status?
I mean, there must be, it sounds like a more onerous, you just write them a letter and tell them you don't want to pay it, like, there has, is there
Yeah,
a
well,
board you go
almost,
in front of?
that's basically what happened.
We're filing it, we filed an appeal,
We filed, actually.
and
we-
it's
That's the
proceeding
proce-
through
proceeding,
revision.
Yeah.
Right.
How long ago did you file the appeal, and do you have any idea, based upon advice, how long that appeal will take to process and go through the channels?
Do you
The state.
recall, I would say that we filed the appeal several months ago. We got a response. We've taken that response.
Actually, we
Through
didn't
to
file,
a-
we didn't file an appeal. I saw we actually got a dunning notice for unpaid sales tax. And this is way back when I became the supervisor, and I said, what is this? And upon doing some research, came to the determination that we should not be paying sales tax on parking at Rye-Town Park.
So it was for last,
Well,
so
let
if you
me-
got it
let
when
me
you first
just-
came on, it was for last year.
Let me just finish. And I researched and found that the park had been filing sales tax returns for the last several years. And I spoke to Mr. Noto and requested him to put together some paperwork in terms of the legal liability of the commission to file and pay sales tax. I requested the accounting firm that we had just hired in March to put together all the numbers, and basically sent a letter requesting a refund to the sales tax, Department of Taxation and Finance. We, of course, got a response, after a few weeks saying no, and making all kinds of statements that were probably inaccurate. And so at that point, we filed an appeals process, an informal appeals process, and got a call back, and they're investigating. And one of the things they said, well, if we give you and this is orally, not written, will you be willing, we only go back 3 years, would you be willing to waive the period prior to 3 years? Which I didn't really respond to, but we don't have a formal offer from them. And that's where it sits right now. We're waiting in fact, I just spoke to the accountant today about calling them and seeing where that is.
Isn't it really easy does Playland pay on
No.
their park? No.
No.
Did you look at other parks? I would think
Yeah,
that the precedent of it.
the first thing I did was call Commissioner Berg of the finance commissioner of the county and say, do you pay sales tax on parking? And she said no, and basically said every park is different. There are different sales tax rules. That's when I began the inquiry and determined that we shouldn't be paying sales tax, and we haven't paid any sales tax since. And of course, any collection procedure was held up.
Well, it sounds like, given what they asked you, that they know that we shouldn't be paying it.
Yeah,
But I'm not sure
that's what I think.
I'm not sure I would give up the previous years, though.
Well, that's another
I
question.
mean, if we weren't supposed to pay
Well, what
it,
is the statute of limitations, actually?
The statute of limitations is 3 years, and I asked Mr. Noto to take a look, and it's a little bit premature because we haven't been given an offer, but I asked him to take a look and basically say, if they were not entitled to sales tax in the first place, does the statute of limitations actually apply? And could we go back even further? So that's where it's sitting right now.
So, Gary, if we end up not having to pay sales tax, I guess that's a good thing.
Yes.
But it also sounds like the decision to not pay sales tax when we've been given a bill for sales tax is a policy decision that the commission probably should have made, and certainly should have been informed about. You talk about this administration, meaning you, I guess, and I guess with regard to the town of Rye, and whatever you all do at the town of Rye level is, I guess, up to you. But decisions that are made that affect the Rye Town Park Commission and affect our audit and affect, notices that we're receiving that we haven't paid taxes probably should have been shared with me and the rest of my colleagues to the extent that they didn't know about it either. You mentioned that Mr. Noto provided a legal opinion. I'd certainly like to see it and to know what it said, and just ask that decisions like this going forward be brought to the attention of the commissioners.
Well, Joe, I'm hopeful that we'll get money back, and I had hoped to be able to advise the commission that we would be getting money back. It didn't cost us any money to file the appeal, and if you're asking why we didn't pay sales tax, or basically we stopped any collection procedures by filing the request. And we've had conversations with them, and I did that as chief executive of the commission. There was no financial burden to the commission to attempt to get a refund back, and hopefully we will be able to get it. And if we don't, then we're going to have to, have to pay sales tax on parking going forward.
Well, that's not entirely responsive to what I raised. I mean, what I'm raising is, it's a policy decision that I'm maintaining should have been brought to the level of the commission. Secondly, an affirmative decision was made, it sounds like, to not pay the taxes that we were asked to pay. So we're in default, I guess, unless and until a decision is made that we don't have to pay it. So that's certainly something as a commissioner I would like to know, that my commission on which I serve has not paid the taxes that it's been asked to pay. Just as a matter of communication and courtesy to the commissioners, because there have been other issues where that has been a problem, including recently, which we'll probably get to later. So I want to make sure that a pattern and practice is in effect where, decisions are not being made by one person when the decision should be made by the entire commission. And I think that's an important thing for this board to be effective.
Well, I look at it as more of an accounting process rather than a policy process. I don't come to the commission every time we pay a bill or do not pay a bill or object to a bill. We get a lot of bills coming into the commission, and not all of them, in fact, very few of them, and including this, involves policy. Had we encountered any legal obligation other than going forward where we would have had to go to the commission, then obviously I would have done so. This was basically an accounting problem that we objected to. And I don't believe that the state of New York should be entitled to collect sales tax. And if you're getting into that, Joe, let me ask you a question. This has been going on now for approximately 6 years, and the commission's books have been audited, and statements have been given to the commission every year in which sales tax has been paid to the state and was never questioned by you or any member of this commission. Okay?
You're
And the
missing-
total-
Gary,
no,
I think you're
you are
not being
missing-
fair to us, because you just said you don't want to show us every bill, which is fine, I agree you shouldn't, but then you're telling us we didn't object to them. So
No,
I
Joe,
just think
Joe,
there's
Joe,
this
I
feeling.
don't want to get into an
This
argument.
is,
This is what I did.
Can I speak?
This is what
I think
did.
I think I have the right to speak.
You have the right to speak when you ask permission to speak.
Ms. Commissioner Zuckerman, do I have
Yes, you do.
permission to speak? Thank you. This wasn't just any bill. It is a fairly big deal to decide you're not going to pay your taxes. I thank you very much for figuring this out, because I think you are right, and that's great. But it still doesn't mean just because you think we're going to get the money back. What if we didn't? What if they fine us? So then it costs us money. It seems clear, based on what you've said, that we will get the money back, and we never should have been paying them. And I very much appreciate that you found this, because this is found money that hopefully we can put in our fund and use for good purposes. However, I feel like we should have been told, and I don't know when you found this. I will cut you some slack because you were new starting in January, and Debbie was new, so there was a lot of new, and I trust that there was much to learn. And however, I guess I would ask you that you would err on the side of caution and telling us more. Maybe it'll be too much, and maybe we'll tell you to stop telling us things, but I would ask that you just err on the side of caution and maybe tell us more at this point.
Thank you, Julie.
Can I, the $63,000 number that you've now discussed in some length, that was only for the 3 years in question? What period of time does 63,000 represent? There's some question whether it's 3 years, whether or not it's a longer period of time, but what does this number represent, how many years?
I don't want to misspeak, I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Okay, because I'm just trying to get an idea of what the sales tax, well, I could probably, it's parking, probably look at the parking and do a analysis on a percentage basis. Probably looks like, for me, probably 3 years, but I'm not sure.
I believe that it's for 3 years.
The only reason I say that, if you're successful and it's more, it could be that the income is actually greater than $63,000.
I believe we filed a refund for $160,000. I think Navy's in the audience. Maybe she remembers our accountant. Do you want to come up, Navy?
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
20 a year.
And understand also, as Jeff pointed out earlier in his discussion, while it's up here in the accounts receivable, it's also in this liability section in the middle of the page, the same amount, $62,000 there as what it's called deferred revenue. So in other words, that money is not in your fund balance right now. It's not there. It's kind of a placeholder at this point, just to point out that, yes, this exists out there. It's deferred. We're not recognizing it in revenue yet. If a check shows up tomorrow from New York State, it will come into your fund balance, at that time. So right now, it's just really there as a placeholder to let everybody know that it's there.
Which is really on a percentage basis of your entire revenues. You're talking about an extra, approximately 6% coming in one shot if you're successful, which is really.
If we're successful.
If you're successful.
And if
Which
we're
would-
unsuccessful, is there money reserved to pay the taxes that we haven't paid?
There,
Sure.
no, that would be cash, that would go out. So this 62 would disappear on both sides, the asset and the liability side, and then anything you would owe would have to be, paid in the year that you pay it.
But it's not a
would-
material number. You're talking about if for 3 years it's 63,000, you're talking about $25,000. I mean, it's not a material number, but yes, you'd still have the
Yeah,
obligation.
well, it should probably have been in the budget for the previous years, and I don't know that it ever was put in any budget.
So is
Maybe-
the
maybe.
state denial of the supervisor's appeal documented in any way? Is there a written denial of the appeal that we
First,
could-
let me just
that we
clarify
could see?
things a bit. We filed a zero tax return, so we are compliant. The New York State has gotten sales tax returns from us, but there's zero revenue. So that's one. It's 3 years. We applied for a 3-year refund. We initially applied for 5 or 6, and then New York State came back and said, you're only eligible for 3 years because you've maxed out on the cutoff. They also said that you're not eligible because you collected sales tax. We went back to them and said, no, we technically didn't collect it. If we collected $5, there was no sales tax included. It was not in our signage. Nowhere did the payer think that they were paying sales tax. So there's been discussion and communication, Gary, you mentioned earlier. The sales tax was never in the budget. No, it was never in the budget. So should New York State come back to us and appeal the 0%, the zero sales tax filings, we have cash in our bank account that would pay for it. But I just want you to know that we file zero sales tax throughout the year. So in the winter, when we don't collect parking fees, we file zero sales tax. So it's not uncommon at all for our entity to file that. But we are positive that New York State is going to, if they do come back and say you should have paid something for June through September in sales tax, that they probably will likely waive any charges because we are in negotiation with them for the sales tax issue.
So we already gave up, it sounds like we already gave up the prior years, based on what you said.
No, we
No,
didn't give
they
it up.
said that we couldn't. They said that they would not go back beyond 3 years because of the statute of limitations.
That's what they said.
That's what they
Has
said.
that been confirmed by legal counsel?
But then you refiled something.
No, we appealed. We appealed. They gave us an opportunity. I think it was 60 days to appeal, whether in conference call or written communications, and I believe we opted for both. We appealed the original judgment that said you do have to pay sales tax because you collected it. And we wrote back and called them up and said, no, we never collected it. And so we're in the appeal process.
What did you say it sounded, they just said to you verbally or via letter
Letter.
Yes,
that you are only, potentially, you're only eligible for 3 years? But
Yes.
we haven't given them anything that says we're only
Right, we haven't
applying
accepted.
or whatever the
Yeah,
word
we
is for
haven't-
3 years.
They haven't made us a formal offer. We have not accepted
Exactly.
anything. We think that they're going to offer us 3 years. And
Yes.
that's what this number comes from.
Right, so
We
worst
think that
case
they will.
scenario is 3 years, the $63,000, which we put on the books as a possible receivable.
So you say we have it in cash. I'm not sure I know what that means, because every year, the commission approves a budget, and the budget has revenues and expenditures. So is there or is there not a line in our expenditure budget that shows sales tax payment?
There isn't, you never had one.
Of course, I'm sure we're all thinking, why not?
Yeah.
If we've been paying it all these years, but there's many
right.
things to think
Yeah.
about, so maybe we should.
Well,
go back
actually,
on
that's
that.
what we're trying to all clean up now.
Right.
With our new accountants, to right some of the problems that have been in the past.
Right, and when I say we have cash, we had, as of yesterday's balance, we had, I think, $400,000 in cash in the Rhinetown Park account. So we have cash that we haven't, because we haven't paid the sales tax, we have cash should they come back and say, you should have paid it for the summer months.
So Gary, what information in the prior budgets and audits are you referring to that you're saying that commissioners should have known about? If it's not in the budget and up to this point it hasn't been in the audit?
I'm just saying that if items have been paid and the commissioners were not aware of it, possibly they should have been aware of it. I'm not making any allegation
Really
that's
hard when people
definite.
don't tell you things
Well,
or hide things.
Julie, I'm not responsible for what happened in prior years,
You are not.
okay? There's something that I discovered, that I thought I discovered was a potential source of revenue for us in terms of going after refund, which we did. And hopefully, we will be able to recoup the $62,000 from the state of New York.
O'Connor Davies, how many years have you been doing the audit for Rye-Town Park Commission?
Oh, several years. I think what
And
the
is this an
situ-
issue that you've ever brought to the attention of the commission?
No, well, we wouldn't look at, at sales tax per se. What we believe.
So this
would've-
has never been an item that's been covered in any prior audits, and it's not a matter that's ever been
I don't-
included in any budget that the commission has passed?
I don't know about the budget question, but it has been something that's been discussed in previous years through management letters. And I mean, I don't have them in front of me here, but it has come up about delinquency of sales tax payments in the past.
What does that mean, delinquency?
Wait,
Some sales tax payments were made late. This is going back. And I don't have it all at my fingertips. I didn't come prepared to discuss that. But it has been discussed in the past.
The other thing with the sales tax and a possible reason why, it's not a budget line, because sales tax is technically not an expense. Sales tax
charge it.
is, if you charge $1 for something and collect sales tax on it and collect $1.08 from me as a payer, the dollar that you collected from me goes into your revenue, right?
Yep.
The 8 cents that you collected me should go on a balance sheet account somewhere as a liability to New York State that I owe 8 cents to New York State. Then, every quarter when I make a payment to New York State for that, in this case, 8 cents, you reduce your cash 8 cents and you relieve your balance sheet liability 8 cents. What I believe has probably occurred here is, since there was no sales tax actually being charged to a resident or a visitor, and they paid the dollar, you essentially absorbed this by paying the sales tax. You paid the 8 cents yourself as the commission. That 8 cents, since there was no balance sheet account set up and no budgeted expense line for it, because it's really not an expense, that 8 cent payment would have been netted against the dollar revenue that you took in, and therefore your revenue from parking that year, in my example, would show 92 cents. And that's probably the level. So if there was $20,000 of these sales tax payments being made every year, and you thought you were going to collect, $400,000 in parking fees, then the $20,000 would have been a factor, in that, and you would have budgeted $380,000. So that's kind of how it went through the books and records here, as just being budgeted, the revenue from the parking being budgeted less than what you were actually collecting from people paying for the parking. Does that make?
Well, because the city of Rye pays taxes on various things, including for property that we own in other municipalities. And there's a record of that, okay, in our financials that the city council receives and is able to review. So, you've been doing the audit of our books for the past several years, as you say. Where is that indicated, the past payment of the sales tax?
Well, as I said, it would have been netted against the parking revenue dollars. That's where it would have been.
But it's not indicated anywhere? I mean,
It
where
would not be
is it?
indicated anywhere.
Okay.
No.
So I'm worried about what you said about being delinquent, because I do know that the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance does charge you a lot when you are delinquent, usually a percentage of revenue. So can we go back and look at if we paid, I don't know if this is you guys, it may be for her, we go back and look at if we paid penalties and/or interest. I think it's just a penalty, I'm not 100% sure, because we would like to get that money back also. If we didn't owe them in the first place, so
No, I think the application included anything that was paid, Julie, penalties, interest,
Okay.
principal.
don't know that because I haven't seen it. So.
Question again? I hate to say, change the subject, but on page 28, the other financing sources, I noticed that there's nothing shown for the town or the city for 2015.
Yes,
Is that accurate?
yes. Because there's a surplus during the year of $163,000, there's no contribution needed. The contribution only when the revenues are less than the expenditures.
Well, last year in 2015, correct me, Commissioners, if I'm wrong, but recognizing that we did have positive cash flow, we did pass a motion, I believe, or decided that both the town's contribution, the city's contribution would still be made so that we can have a fund balance greater than what the 160, so that we can start, we wanted to create a fund balance towards a capital fund. Now, I'm not sure how that works. I'm not an accountant, and I don't practice one or pretend to be one. But the town of Rye and the city of Rye had budgeted X amount of dollars in their respective budgets to compensate for losses of the Wright Town Park Commission. The fact that we didn't have a loss, there was a commitment on the commission's commitment to still expend those dollars from both the city and the town so that we could start building up what we didn't have, which was a capital fund. Now, I believe that the outgoing commissioner from the city of Rye mentioned that that was going to be done, and I think our former secretary was supposed to have done that, and I thought I got a comment that we did receive the money from the city of Rye.
We did not get a payment from the city of Rye. We had asked for those payments, but they could not be administered until we had audited financials.
All right, so
And
we
I
might get some
received
more money.
I received a request last night
Oh.
from
Excellent.
the city manager from the city of Rye asking us please to request the funds.
And the same with the town of Rye.
I didn't receive that request from the town of Rye.
Okay. No, we're trying to build up the fund for capital, and one of the rationales to do that is that if the park does really well, and the financial statement shows a positive cash flow, that we would take that fund balance and put it into operating or capital. And we wanted to start working, because we recognize there's a lot that has to be done. So it was no loss for the city or the town to continue with their contribution as anticipated in their respective budgets. So why not just give the money to the town of Rye and make a financial commitment? That's it. That was what I recall.
Joe?
I sat on this commission a few years ago, and so I'm just pinch hitting tonight. But if that was agreed to, and I have no knowledge since I haven't been a member of this commission in over 3 years, on what basis is that? Because the operating deficit is different, the percentages, than the capital contribution. Am I not correct?
That's correct.
So I guess I'm just for clarification purposes.
The percentage?
The percentages, that money, was it going to be based on an operating percentage or a capital percentage?
It was capital percentage.
Capital percentage?
Yes.
Yeah, because the capital's not
That's
the
my
same.
recollection.
Yeah, the percentages just are
Ju-
different.
I just want to clarify, on page 31, there were capital contributions during the year. That was page 28 is operating,
Oh, yeah,
is the operating statement. On page 31, you would see the capital
There it
fund
is.
operations. There was $30,000 spent and $30,000 of capital contributions.
But the
Yes.
operating budget supported the capital budget in that regard, right?
No. Those are, you see the other financing sources are from the town and from the city? So those are
20
contributions that coming from the town and the city.
Capital contributions, because
You
that's
guys
based on
figure
the
it out,
30 at
okay.
62
I'm
percent.
just trying to get more money for the commission. You guys can figure it out. I'm not gonna get into it.
Well, I would think that the rationale for the money in the budget of the town and money in the budget of the city would be to cover deficits which happen virtually yearly, I understand, before the 2015 year. then that would make sense. However, since there's an operating surplus, then I would think that any contribution from the town and the city would be voluntary, because there's no need to cover any deficit. So, I don't know how to, I'm not sure how the city works its budget. Is the money in your capital budget to give to the commission? Is that how it works?
No, it's in our operating budget because it's
Operating.
meant to make up for operating deficiencies. There being none, as Commissioner Salanitra said and as Commissioner Feinstein recollected, this would be a capital contribution, and I think that was
Right.
the decision that was made.
Yes.
So any contribution made to a capital fund
Correct.
in the Rye-Town Park budget would be subject to the
No, that would be
percentages-
coming out of your
that are-
operating
that
budget
are
to the commission
the
capital
percentages
budget.
that govern capital contributions.
Okay.
I mean, it would really be, if in fact, last year and this year, you have surplus, which is the first time, at least I could, recollect that ever occurring, at least never happened during the years I sat on this commission. I just think from a policy point of view, one of the things that the Rye-Town Park never had was really a real capital reserve. This is a great way to start building up a capital reserve or a sinking fund, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you.
So do we,
We,
do we
you-
technically, like,
you
as
can do-
Rye City, we take the money out and put it back in? Do we keep it, or is there no policy actually
Well-
for surpluses?
You know what, the best thing to do is go back to the videotape in December when this was discussed, and there was a process that our confidential secretary was supposed to work with both the city and the town to implement the exchange or the contribution to the capital fund by the respective city and town. I don't know the details, I just remember that there was money gonna be put into the capital. That's just my
All right,
recollection.
well, we'll go back and talk to her.
Before we get off this, I'm going to ask for a motion, but maybe why don't you come up, since we're talking money, and go over very briefly the August 31st actual versus budget, and that was furnished.
Discuss the numbers that are in that.
And
I think
the
you'll find it on
commissioners,
page 14 of your packet.
the commissioners had asked a couple of months ago to get a, we having technical difficulties here? As I say, the commissioners had asked a couple of months ago that we get up-to-date income and expenses so that we could track where we are on a regular basis. So we have these figures as of August 31st.
Okay. So we close the books each month, and we compare budget to actual, and then we did like a pro rata budget for the few months that we're in season. And so the actual, and this is all in, this is all of the revenue, every dollar that was earned and came into our Rye-Town Parks through August 31st. So total revenue actual was $1,113,919, so basically $1,114,000. And then you see in the lower portion of the page, we break down expenses. So our wages were $373,000, which is $29,000 below budget. Our benefits were $60,000, about $9,000 below budget, where we thought we'd be. And then we have utilities, taxes, and interest of $37,263, about $8,000 below budget. And then we move on to administrative costs, and that's $57,000, and that's $16,000 below budget. So as you can see, we're trending a little bit behind budget for the months through August 31st. And then we move into operations and maintenance, and that tends to flat a little bit because that includes the regular monthly maintenance, and we will see that that continues. Some of that, the repairs and maintenance, will continue throughout the season, I should say throughout the year. So that's at $141,000.
which is slightly above budget of $2,800. So total expenses was $669,904, basically $670,000. Our net revenue for the 8 months ended August 31st was $444,015. And as I mentioned earlier, we have about $400,000 in the bank. So what we checked the numbers, just made sure that that made sense, because it is obviously higher than expected. We exceeded budget because we would have expected to be, if we looked at the budget for the year, we expected to be much less, and so we wanted to get through and understand, what happened. So we looked at things like dates, days the beach was open, parking, number of tickets, and so forth. And so far, it seems to hold true, and that the numbers hold water. But then, as you heard Terry mentioned, Labor Day hit us hard. So I think in September we'll see some of this positive variance. We'll lose a little bit of it, maybe $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. I'm not sure exactly where that's going to end up, but we think we're going to end up the year much better than anticipated, and it's because June, July, and August were very good to us, and we managed to keep expenses down. What we've done, and I think I mentioned this at the last presentation, is Kathy, our senior accountant, has gone down to the beach to Town Parks and has actually taken physical inventory. We pay a lot more attention and work with Terry on purchases. What we're buying, do we need it? So we're paying a little bit more attention to our expenses, and then, Terry and her team do a great job at the revenue side, and we try and control the expenses. But we think we're gonna end up better than budget at year end. We're gonna close September, and when we close September 30th, we're gonna move right into the budget. So we'll close September, project out the last quarter, October through December, and see if there's any adjustments, anything that we know in terms of expenses or revenue coming in, and then we'll prepare a 2017 budget for you. And if we pay sales tax, I promise you there'll be a sales tax line item there for you. Any questions?
I have one question. The revenue is much higher than in prior years.
Yeah.
And of course, a park is dependent upon the weather, and obviously this was a great hot summer, which attracted people as well. But do you think it's also possible that the revenue is higher because of the internal controls and less slippage than in the past?
It's possible. I don't want to, it's hard for me to speak to it because we're new. We got here in April, but we did put a lot of controls in place in terms of, as I said, accountability, making sure that the individuals went to the banks, and we've also met with different banking institutions to, talk about lock boxes and safes and things of that nature. We're doing what we can in terms, because anytime you have a cash business, obviously you run certain risks. But honestly, I think a lot of it is due to Terry and her team, and there's just more communication. So as I said, our senior accountant Kathy and Christina and Debbie and Terry are constantly communicating and what's going on with the revenue on the different line items. And then, of course, we pay a lot of attention on our end on the expense side.
Anybody else? We have a motion to accept the audit report. May I have a motion?
Can I just ask a question
Sure.
about that? What does it mean to accept an audit? Because I'm not sure we do this in the city of Rye. Accept meaning I've received a copy of it?
Yes.
Or is there some sort of legal implication to
No,
it?
we've accepted, we have formally received the audit
Okay.
report.
Is there a reason why a resolution needs to be done for that?
I think it's the best procedure, and I know that we're doing it at the town. I don't know if you do it in the city.
So there is a typo in the resolution if we're going to vote on it.
And
In the second whereas, second line, Town Park has conducted, I think you mean to say, an audit of financial statements for the year ended December 31st?
that's,
Right.
is that correct? All right. As amended,
So moved.
second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Killian,
Yes.
Commissioner Sack,
Yes, I accept and receive the audit.
Commissioner Feinstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Marino,
Yes.
Commissioner Salanitro,
Yes.
Commissioner Zuckerman.
Yes. Thank you. Our next item is, I guess this is the highlight of the evening. And thank you to the auditors. Thank you, Navy. A resolution to select a licensee and to retain special counsel. This obviously involves Seaside Johnny's. And let me just say, I received, and the commission has received, a great many emails on this subject. And the only comment I have about that is to say that I think it's absolutely wonderful that the stakeholders in Rye Town Park are so concerned about its operation that they would take the time to express an opinion as to what the commission should do about the restaurant. Just as a matter of interest, I think, and I see that Mr. Ambrose is here, a lot of the comments were not positive. However, the resolution before us basically gives the commission the authority to, A, negotiate with Mr. Ambrose. It does not set out limitations in terms of terms or dollars or anything like that. And perhaps most importantly, it enables us to engage and retain a special counsel with expertise in the field of negotiating restaurant leases and licenses so that the commission can make the best agreement that it possibly can. I know that there's a lot of thought that perhaps we should go out to bid again without entering into any kind of a license, or perhaps enter into a shorter-term license with Mr. Ambrose. But that's entering into a shorter term or any term is what the commission would be authorized to do through its retained counsel. May I have first a motion and a second, then we'll have discussion, and we'll allow members of the public to speak as well. Motion and a second, please? No?
Absent that, let me please speak on behalf of the majority of Rye residents I'm in contact with every day.
If we have a motion, that means we're voting on it.
I heard no
While they
response.
figure it out,
I heard
can
no
you tell me your name and
My name is
address?
Sean Doherty at 20 Redfield Street.
I'm sorry.
Sean Doherty, 20 Redfield Street in Rye.
First of all, we gotta open it up, right? We gotta make a motion.
I heard no response to
we
the
still-
motion.
Well, we're conducting business, I think. And I don't know if there's going to be,
I'm very,
No, I asked for a motion and a second.
without hearing it first, I approached the,
I understand.
yeah.
May I have a motion and a second so that we can open discussion on the resolution?
Make a motion.
And I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Louis, you made the
Yes.
motion. Thank you.
Let me just go over a little bit of a history.
Should I sit down for this?
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
please.
thanks.
Thank you.
I'll be right here on the left-hand side.
You'll be invited up. We sent out, actually, we had an RFQ earlier for the entire site, which could have included, which could have, no, excuse me. I have the floor. We originally went out with a request for qualifications for the entire site, which could have included also a proposal for a restaurant only. We did not get a significant response. We got one response from somebody, from an applicant who wanted to make a catering hall. And we got a response from Mr. Ambrose's people, Seaside Johnny. We then went out for a restaurant-only RFP and received 2 responses, one of whom withdrew. The process was totally open, and I know that some comments have been made about who may or may not have filed an application or wanted to file an application, but the fact remains we have one applicant that is remaining. And that is what is before us. Yes, the commission can choose to choose nobody and rebid, in which case there is a strong possibility that we would not have a restaurant for the 2017 season. My view, and the view I think of many, is that the restaurant is a needed amenity to the park and helps draw people and also furnishes about $100,000 in income every year to the park. And therefore, let me just state, we attempted after the last meeting to call a special meeting to discuss the process going forward as to what we should do. Since the last meeting, and despite requests therefore, we were not able to maintain or obtain a quorum to call a special meeting. It was my decision as president to have a draft resolution drawn for presentation before this commission for discussion. It will be up to the commission to determine how it wishes to go forward. I've made the recommendation that we should hire special counsel with restaurant expertise to negotiate a lease on favorable terms and conditions to the commission. And if that lease negotiation was not successful for some reason, we could then go out to bid again. There is the possibility that a short-term lease could be negotiated with the current license holder. And pardon me for using the term lease. I do mean license. It is not a lease, it is a license. But this is a decision that the entire commission will make. And at this point, I will leave it up. I will throw it open for discussion by the commission members first, and then members of the public. Does anybody wish to speak on this matter?
I mean, I'd kind of like to hear from the
Yeah,
Public
I'll yield
first.
my time to the public
Well,
first.
can I just ask a question? Once again, I'm at a deficit because I wasn't part of the process here. I understand that there was an RFP process. There were 2 bidders, 1 withdrew subsequently. The one that's on the table right now that we're having this conversation, I'm turning to legal counsel. Is this a responsible bidder, and is it responsive to the RFP?
And Paul, why don't you come up and sit at the table, please?
Does it meet those qualifications to even consider?
Yes, they did. Yes,
I
they-
mean, since I didn't see the first RFP, and I apologize for that, just want to make sure from a legal point of view.
Yes, the proposal from Seaside Johnny's was responsive to the RFP and is a perfectly legal and sufficient proposal that the commission could determine if they wish to accept them or not.
And all the supporting documentation. was-
Yes, for the purposes of the RFP, it was fine. Ultimately, the discussion of retaining a special counsel was actually an offshoot of a recommendation from, I think, Mayor Sack in a few months ago, that Rye had a very good experience when they had done one of their sites. They retained a firm that apparently had some expertise in this field, and they felt that they negotiated a very good agreement. It's certainly not a field that I have great expertise in, so I'm happy to have the commission retain someone who could do that. Generally, you do it once you have selected a successful opponent, then you would retain counsel to negotiate the deal. Obviously, we're not there yet, so the issue is, do you want to retain counsel now before you select one, or do you want to select someone or make a decision on, do you move forward on a short-term agreement or a short-term license, rebid, I don't use the term rebid, it's not a bid, it's a request for proposals, again, or do you simply select this applicant and move forward with a license? That's a policy decision you'd have to make.
one other question. Even if you select it, as part of the legislation, you can't have a long-term contract without the state approving that, isn't that correct?
Not entirely. I've reached out to the Association of Towns Council to get some input on that. I mean, I think there is a general feeling that it's, under the general municipal law, it's 3 years. Because we are a commission, we are not a municipality. There's a possibility we could have it for a longer period of time. There was special legislation adopted, I think, in 2010, when the commission, no, actually, it was before that.
It was
before-
I think.
2002.
It was 2002,
when
thank
the
you,
lease
yeah, because
first.
I knew I wasn't around. That permitted an extension for this particular licensee, or for this particular license to be extended, and at that point, it was extended from 2000, I think it was originally a 10-year agreement that was extended, a 5-year agreement extended another 10, or it was 15 and 5. So there was already legislation, but I believe it is only related to the existing licensee. So I'm not saying it would be applicable to a future license.
I read it exactly the same way you do, that ship has sailed.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah. So,
Answer your question?
why don't you stay up here?
Can you
Paul?
stay up there, because I have a question?
Let me get a pen.
I have been trying to figure out the difference between extending the current lease for a year and actually choosing, quote, a new licensee and negotiating a new lease, or license rather, for a year. 'Cause seemingly, those are two options, the third option being negotiating a license for longer than a year.
Well, we could negotiate a license for 2 years or 3 years.
Right, well, that's what I.
Okay, is that
I
your
said
question? Is,
So my
no.
question is, or it seems to me that the choices we have in front of us are to extend the license for a year, negotiate a new license for a year, or negotiate a new license for more than 1 year.
Yes, or you have the option to do nothing, which is to let the license expire.
Oh,
I mean, the
sorry,
issue of whether we
I
even
didn't-
have a restaurant there is another policy decision
Okay.
the commission would
Yes,
make.
you're right.
And I'm not, and I think prior to your being appointed to the commission, this particular licensee had requested, I think on 2 separate occasions, an extension of his license that the commission rejected. So there had been prior conversations and requests by this licensee for an extension of time that the commission declined to grant.
Meaning prior to the end of the license.
Correct.
Extending it beyond.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember, it was 2 years ago, John, you had asked for an extension. I think twice, there were two separate occasions they came and asked for an extension, and 2 times it was declined. So the answer to your original question is yes, those are essentially your options. You could do nothing, you could offer, and this applicant has not requested a short-term license, he has requested a long-term license. You could offer a 1-year license, or you could offer a longer-term license, and if you did the short-term, presumably you would republish the RFP and see if you got a different response. But as I understand it, the other responder withdrew because he said that he wouldn't have had time, if he were selected, to be up and running by May of next year.
So I think I still want to hear from members of the public before I comment, but just to clarify one thing that has come up. My understanding, because Gary, I think you said something like that ship has sailed. I don't know what you were referring to, but my understanding is with regard to length of lease or length of license agreement, is that, and this is, I think, prior practice, anything greater than 3 years requires special state legislation. And my understanding is practice in the state legislature is our local senator and assemblyman have turned to the local boards like the Rye City Council and the Rye Town Board to get their approval for anything over 3 years prior to the time that they would even submit legislation to be passed in Albany. So is that I don't know if that's true or not, that's what I've been told.
Well,
I've asked for your
Yeah, that's generally,
perspective.
all right, that's the general understanding. And what we couldn't figure out is when this original license was approved, it was for longer than 3 years. And so we don't know what
and
happened.
required, I think, special.
Well, no, there was
legislation.
no, in 1998 or whenever it was initially approved, there was no special state legislation. Subsequent to that, there was legislation enacted that nunc-pro-tunc approved it, retroactively. So I would agree that the general understanding is a 3-year is under the general municipal law. That's the most you could have an agreement. The problem with that is, I'm sure you understand, is that for a applicant to come in and commit to, substantial capital improvements, they were going to want a longer period of time to recoup the investment. So, for today's purposes, I would say 3 years would be your max, unless I can find authority to go beyond that.
So I think what you're saying is there may be authority because we're a commission and not,
Right, you are technically not a municipality, because you don't tax, you don't have
Well,
any,
but we're.
you don't provide any services other than essentially, all
Well,
you do is manage a park, essentially.
Except we're arguing that we are a municipality for sales tax purposes.
Yes, well, we had,
Because
that was a
that's
good
why we
argument to
shouldn't be
make.
paying sales tax.
That's a good argument to make. Well, we are a municipal.
making me
Well, we
nervous.
are a municipal entity. Okay, I mean, to be clear on that. You're not a municipality, but you are a municipal entity, meaning you are created by the state legislature to provide a public service. You're nonprofit, so you are a municipal entity. You're just not a municipality. There's no town of Rytown Park. There is a distinction.
Joe,
Let me, okay. Benning, you go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question of Mayor Sack. Joe, the experience with hiring a consultant to develop the license agreement, is it okay to do that before you have a party in mind? Does it make, or does it have to be after the fact?
So,
Does it-
I can speak to our experience in the city of Rye with regard to Whitby Castle. And when we sought a new operator of Whitby Castle, we issued an RFP, and we actually retained a special restaurant consultant to assist us, I believe, in even drafting the RFP in the first place. And then once the RFP was issued, this consultant assisted us in placing it in the right hands, so to speak, and generating interest and ensuring that there was an appropriate number of responders and qualified people that and entities that responded. So in fact, we got a half dozen or more very qualified companies that wanted to bid on the Whitby contract. So and then the consultant stayed in place and assisted us in reviewing the RFP responses.
Do the license.
Well, we actually also hired an attorney, which I think is what has
Right.
been proposed here
Right.
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
that helped
I get
us
that.
negotiate the
Right.
actual
The
agreement.
last
That's
part
what
of
we
it
are
is-
proposing, yes.
Sorry.
Once we, with the help of the consultant, got the responders and then started to narrow it down, we then, when it became clear that we were going to enter into a contract with somebody, then we additionally, in addition to the consultant, hired an attorney who assisted us in actually negotiating the terms of that contract. And both parts of it were extremely helpful, I think, to the success of us getting someone in there who has been terrific.
Because part of the RFP that we sent out, we used our existing license agreement to let people understand what we currently had in effect. Hindsight's 2020. Should we have drafted a license agreement that would have been different as a tool, if you will, for further negotiations and maybe have other interests? Do you think the license agreement should be done before, as a general, with some
No, we
broad
didn't do
terms in it?
we didn't negotiate the license agreement itself, or the contract itself, until after we had
the selection.
decided to,
Okay. So it wouldn't make any sense
But
exclusively
I think you
Yeah,
bring up a point, though, and which is, sorry, I'm going to just go to where I am. I'm very happy to hear everyone, but I have all these emails that I printed out. Not even all the emails, because I stopped about 3 hours ago printing them out, about how our residents feel, not all from Rye City. And I said this, I don't remember, I believe it was in our last meeting on this. I feel strongly that we need to hire a restaurant consultant, not an attorney, but a restaurant consultant, to help us figure out what went wrong. I mean, we had someone that bid that said they didn't have enough time. They didn't, maybe we didn't have start with enough at the beginning, but I feel strongly, it is a bit of a unique situation. It's on a beach, it's on the water, it's seasonal, it's arguably seasonable. So it's not that expensive. We hired a grant writer. To go down every road and really feel like we've really done our job, I feel strongly we should hire a restaurant consultant that can help us look at what our RFP was, maybe what it should have been, and who is the universe. We may end up in the same situation we are today. And if we do, fine, but at least I would feel like, I hope everyone else would feel like we have fully done our job in turning over every stone and putting out the best, product that we can. And I think I said that a few weeks ago. I thought we might be going down that road, but somehow that didn't happen.
Well, we didn't have any meetings since then, so now we're having this meeting.
Anything from the public?
Members of the public? Oh, John, you want to say something?
Excuse me.
Um,
This is not a member of the public, this is an interested party, is it not?
He's definitely an interested party, very definitely, but
Have the choice to speak first.
he's at the microphone. John, would you yield, please, to the gentleman? Thank you.
Given that you're an interested party, I think it's probably harmful to the residents of Rye to actually have a voice. I can sign it.
Debbie's
if you'd
keeping
like.
track of who's talking.
Sean Doherty, correct?
Thank you.
Doherty?
Dougherty. I think I
Thank
might have
you.
flooded members of the commission's email today, and I apologize for that. I agree with Commissioner, Killian's representation that I do think that the timing and the window of time may not have been enough to solicit accurate and proficient bids to take over and provide time for us. I would respectfully disagree with the fact that the process was not a proposal for qualifications. It was a request for proposals. So it was not, by virtue of submitting proposals, you're not therefore qualified. In addition to that, I think I speak for lots of members of the Rye population who pay taxes and who vote. This entity, we can talk about council, we can talk about consultants, and that all sounds very sexy and cosmopolitan and very sophisticated. The reality is, this enterprise operates as a lawless 4 walls of bricks, mortar, and alcohol, which does not in any way reflect the populace of the town of Rye. Beyond that, and I don't mean to say that we shouldn't have restaurants that serve alcohol. I think that's a fantastic thing. This is an entity that does not comply in a lot of respects with noise violations and things like that. From our perspective, a lot of what I'll say is more likely conjecture that reflects the larger Rye populace. But I think in the sense of having a larger, broader, and more depth, more vibrant RFP and/or RFQ process would yield the best results. This window of proposals, not qualifications, occurred during the depths of summer. I myself, not that I have my finger on the pulse of what happens all around the town, I can tell you that a lot of the folks and a lot of the traffic passersby that are patrons of this restaurant are not folks that appreciate the stature and the gentrification of our park, which I now understand is now considered a landmark. So we have had all these conversations about the maintenance and the preservation of the park, yet we have this enterprise that attracts things that are not, I don't think, reflective of the broader population. I'll leave it there, and then I think our request, as Commissioner Killian reflected, would be to extend the window for proposals in the time where people are back at their desks, back working. We'd like to have at least 90 days to have other bidders come to the table and submit qualifying proposals and/or just plain proposals.
Thank you.
Wait, can I ask a question? Did you, I'm sorry, I heard you right. Did you say there were violations on the restaurant?
I told you that what I was going to tell you was conjecture, not confirmed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so I don't know. You probably know better than I.
Right. Well, I don't know of any, but I would, if
Yeah.
there were, I'd like to know, and I
Yeah.
think the commission would like to know as well.
Let's be clear. Let's take away the
Yeah.
legal reality of this. This restaurant stands out as a scourge on what is otherwise considered a national landmark or otherwise considered therefore. And if you don't believe me, we'll go down there tonight and we'll have a beer and we'll talk about exactly what's going on.
Thank you for your comments.
I've been away for a week.
Please.
Jamie Jensen, 588 Forest Avenue. I've been away for a week, so I am coming to this conversation late, and I apologize because you all see me often. But I did send you all an email, and I'm not going to read it here, so I'm going to speak a little off the cuff. I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that we have a small business operator in this town, John Ambrose, running Seaside Johnny's, and I don't think it's about Seaside Johnny's. How should I say this? I think the conversation we need to be having is the conversation that Commissioner Killian just made, which is, why did we do such a bad job at putting out an RFP? No blaming, no anything. Can we just do a better job? Can we talk about what it means to consider the community in which a park exists, that it should reflect the desires and needs of the tax-paying public, that I say it over and over again, and I know I sound repetitive, but we are not Playland South. This is not about a money grab. This is not, we should not start the conversation with, what if we lose the $100,000 from John Ambrose's rental? I get that we worry about budget, but you should never manage by money. You should manage by mission. And I'm really disappointed in us as a community. So John aside, he's a small business operator, and all the power to him. He wants to keep working this restaurant. He's done what he's done, and he's done it. Whether you like what he does or not, that has to be aside. The conversation needs to be about transparency. It needs to be about process. It needs to be about having the moral conversation, managed to mission, not managed to budget. And I think we need to start there. And I do agree with Commissioner Killian. I think it's time to stop, talk about what we want, and actually spend the money to hire a consultant. We hired a grant writer to gather data from stakeholders. We haven't figured out whether or not we're going to apply for grants yet, but meanwhile, we don't want to gather data from our stakeholders around the restaurant. That seems to me a real shame. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
Russell Gold, 7 Hayward Place in Rye. I'm not as good off the cuff as my colleague here, so I'm just going to read what I put together. Just want to take a moment of your time to express my dissatisfaction with the process surrounding the Rye-Town Parks Commission's response to the Rye-Town Park Restaurant RFP. I find myself feeling betrayed by what I see as a pattern of misdirection and deception when we were assured by this very commission that the process would be both transparent and direct. For the last 30 days or so, you have attempted to placate us with your assurances that the process for responding to the restaurant RFP would be collaborative and inclusive by including the community at large, who is the largest stakeholder, the ultimate stakeholder. As our last Rye-Town Park Commission meeting came to a close in August, we were assured by the Commission that despite the 11th hour withdrawal of a competitive proposal to the restaurant RFP, the Commission, while still on the record, would continue to explore and entertain any and all alternative solutions to this last-minute conundrum. Possibilities that were openly mentioned were a one-year extension to the current agreement, reopening the RFP in hopes of attracting additional respondents, writing a new RFP with longer timelines and allowances for mandated site upgrades, just to name a few. We were also assured by the Commission that there would be a more detailed explanation as to why the 50-page professionally produced Liberator proposal was withdrawn just a few days before presentations were to be made. I believe we were told that the official letter of withdrawal would be released and further disclosure would take place as to the content and context of the phone calls that were made between the respondent and the Commission. Furthermore, on August 2nd, 2016, myself, along with a few others in the community who have been identified based on our overall involvement with Rye-Town Park as key stakeholders, received an email from the Rye Town Park Commission inviting us to be part of the conversation as to how we should best proceed. You specifically invited us to, and I quote, "to assist you in evaluating the proposals as the first step in the process." Let me be perfectly clear. This is not about Mr. Ambrose. This is not about Seaside Johnny's. This is not about Mr. Chernin. Not about them. This is all about the deceptive and disingenuous way in which the Rye Town Park Commission appears to conduct its business. On numerous occasions, regarding multiple issues, the Commission has baited us with offers of inclusion and transparency, only to have the offer evaporate without explanation. You have assured us that you would develop a process and a timeline to work through issues like this and then reveal to the community this process. Unfortunately, you never seem to follow through. Is it any wonder that this type of behavior gets people up in arms? In conclusion, I just want to say that the community at large is not your adversary. We are here to help as a representative sounding board for what we feel is important. If you ask for our input, we are eager and willing to offer it. Please be true to your word and stop shutting us out.
Thank you. Members of the public, anybody else want to speak? Yes, sir.
Bill Bisceglia, 382 Milton. No affiliation during the first remark. I think John and Seaside Johnny's done a great job over the last 15 or so years that I've been in Rye, at least. I think it's good for the park. You know, he's got a good staple here. Yes, he does have complaints. I hear him. I live close to the park. I know people that live right on the park, and it's a problem. But I think he tries to do what he can do to help his business do well. And obviously he's doing well because he's put out a bid to continue the restaurant. But I think as a commission, I'm not going to point the finger at you like some of the other people have, but I think you're behind the 8 ball right now, and I think you know that. And I think you have no choice but to extend it 1 or 2 years and then spend some real time and put out a good RFP and get some competition in there and make a deal either with John again 3 years from now or a new entity, or if the members of the town have a handful of restaurants that they think should be in there and that could do a better job and make more money for the town or beautify the park, that's great. But to sit here and argue about it in the 11th hour, I think it's a waste of time. So those are my thoughts. As far as my affiliation for Friends of Rye Town Park, we feel as a board that it's good to have a restaurant in the park. We think it's good for the park. It brings more people into the park. We think security-wise, it's, as Nadine might argue, that the late-night people that go to Seaside Johnny's might be bad for the park. We look at it in another way where it's somewhat good because there are people around, there's people watching instead of people sneaking into the park and hanging out in the park. So there's two sides to it. So we would like to have you extend it, whether it's a year or 2 years. I think you need 2 years to really vet out some competition for John, because right now he's got nothing and he's got all the leverage in the world to renegotiate the 1 or 2 year deal to extend it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I guess, not knowing the gentleman that just spoke, I'd like to request a formal endorsement from the Friends of Rye Town Park that this gentleman does in fact speak on their behalf. But that notwithstanding, I actually share the view that we shouldn't put small businesses out of business the moment the lights in this chamber turn off. However, I do believe that we should start a process, like I said, in agreement with Commissioner Killian, whereby we reinvigorate and refocus on a real RFP and or RFQ process, which is much more vibrant, much more validated, and much more monitored in the light of day. Not that nothing of that happened heretofore didn't happen, but I think that a lot of folks just weren't paying attention, myself included. So I appreciate your latitude in this late hour. In addition to the comments that were just made, One other item has gone and has remained unmentioned. This structure remains unattended and unoccupied in excess of 8 months of the year, and I believe that that's a fair statement. Whereas residents and users of the park, taxpayers, voters, are around the park and in the park all year long. I disagree. I own two restaurants of my own in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I understand what a seasonal business looks like. I live with the downturns of what those businesses can do. You have to be kidding me that a restaurant on this piece of property, on this piece of water, cannot generate money, revenue, and/or profit 13 months out of the year, and I mean that as a specific exaggeration. That being said, I'd like to also re-enter the discussion around a year-long lease, mandatory. In Manhattan, which is not the benchmark, but it is a pretty good indicator of how restaurants can work and fail. In Manhattan, if you are not open for more than 35 days at a time, by and large, you are put out of business. We should have the same standard with contractual leases that are granted by this commission for business owners in this space. If you're not open, it should be considered a closed property.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm curious. Is it your understanding of the pulse of the community that they'd much prefer a 12-month
It is.
occupancy rather than a short?
It's my
Is that
understanding.
your understanding?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd
be happy to, no,
I'm happy to hear
it's a
that.
fair question. I think I've done my own share of armchair polling, which is not as concise as what you might undertake. I'd be happy to undertake that. I have no stake in this. I'd be happy to have a stake in it.
No, I was
But
just
it's a great
curious.
question. It's
Yeah,
a
no.
great question. Every single house I go to, city of, town of, Rye, why isn't that place open? We will pay for drinks, food, concessions for the kid, everything, year-round. Football games, baseball games, soccer games, anything around it. It is a useless endeavor to have that property closed. And I have to admit, I haven't gone through why this commission allows that space to remain unoccupied. And if we're talking about revenue, $100,000, multiply it by 4, if not more, to get more revenue. And I agree with the prior lady's comments. We shouldn't be thinking about this is a treasure of the city and the town and the county, quite frankly. We should be thinking about moral direction as well as what we could make off of it. I hate to say it. It's one of the best pieces of real estate in the country, if not on the East Coast, by a far measure. So, and I don't want to put small business owners out of business. As a part-time job, I'm a small business owner myself. However, there's no reason, at least none has been presented to me, that should not be open and maintained 12 months a year. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, comments? Joe?
Well, I think, in part it's a timing question, right? I think that we ought to try to get some more bidders. Even the resolution, Gary, that you had drafted said that the new lease or license would start on May 1st, 2017. It's still only September, 20th? So I think.
Well, it says no later than. No later than.
Okay. But I think that there is still enough time to embark in that process. And I, again, the reason why I gave the background of our experience in the city of Rye with Whitby Castle is because I think it helped. For whatever reason, we didn't choose to do that here, but I think we can still do it. I think we've heard the gamut of perspectives with regard to Seaside Johnny's. I think some good, some bad, some maybe in the middle. I do think that Mr. Ambrose should be commended for running an establishment for this many years and clearly doing it successfully. That he's wanted to do it every year and still wants to do it some more. I think that you definitely will find people in the community who enjoy Seaside Johnny's immensely. But certainly, what I have learned as mayor and in public service is that there's always two sides to every story. And, as recently as today, we've heard a lot of feedback, as Gary, you indicated yourself, has been not so positive. But I think we want the best, restaurant there and the best deal there that we can get. And I think the way to do that is to reinvigorate the process. I don't think it's too late to do that. I suppose an alternative discussion could be to alleviate a little pressure on the situation. If people do think that it's not enough time, we could attempt to seek Mr. Ambrose's agreement to a one-year extension. I'm not saying this is where we're going to go, or even if I agree with it, but that's certainly a not unreasonable option. However, Mr. Ambrose doesn't have to do that. In fact, we've heard from Mr. Noto that Mr. Ambrose wants a long-term lease. So that may not even be possible, even if we decide we want to do it. So in which case, we're in a position where, the only other alternative is to, leave it vacant. And I think that there's lots of reasons why that is not a good option. We could maybe have that discussion if we get to that point. I hope we don't. So I guess where I'm netting out is, I would like to reinvigorate the RFP process and engage the assistance of a consultant to try to get as many applicants as possible, and even to get a more fleshed out application from Mr. Ambrose, and see where that goes. In the alternative, I might consider a one-year extension, so we buy ourselves more time to do it. But of course, that is not completely up to us. It's up to Mr. Ambrose as well. So that's, I think I'm touching upon all the topics. People may agree or disagree, but I think those are the issues that we have to settle.
I think Jamie said it best. I tried to. I wasn't quite as eloquent as Jamie, but it truly is not about Seaside Johnny's or what's going on there now. It's about what should be there. I don't, if we do go ahead with the new RFP process, I don't think, we're not going to get someone in there by May because, and I think looking at a one-year extension is probably the best idea to be fair to the people that are there now. It doesn't, because there's construction involved in this. If someone was just going to move in, whether it's Mr. Ambrose or somebody new, that would be different. But what was contemplated by Mr. Ambrose, and I believe the other bidder, we don't know what the other ones would have said, was actually doing reconstruction and renovating. So that being said, I don't think it's possible to do a new RFP and have somebody ready by May.
Well, I think,
So,
Julie, I think that's realistic, and that's what I had said earlier. The choice is, if the commission's desire is to rebid, then the question is, do we rebid and talk to Mr. Ambrose about a short extension, a year, even 2 years? Or do we risk the space going vacant, which I don't think anybody thinks is the best idea, but it's up to the commission to decide. Mr. Ambrose is here. I have no idea if he wants to consider a one-year extension, knowing that we're looking to bid this again. On the other hand, it gives him another year of operating profits, and he may in the end be successful again.
I would suggest we not have that conversation at a public meeting, sir.
Well, I'm just saying
Okay.
that those are what the alternatives are. And I get the sense that the commission does not wish to vote on this resolution. Is that correct? This resolution does state specifically Seaside Johnny's, and it does provide to hire a restaurant counsel specializing in restaurant licenses and leases. However, if it is a sense of the commission to not go forward at this time, then we can withdraw the motion.
So I know it must not be fun, Mr. Ambrose, to sit here and listen to yourself be talked about, and I know you were at the podium before. I don't know if you've decided not to speak, but I think since you had wanted to speak before, you're certainly welcome to come back up, but that's, of course, your choice.
While he's deciding, can I just say one more thing? I think the other thing, and Mr. Doherty brought it up, whether or not it's seasonal or year-round, I think is something else for us to look at. When I was sitting here, I was just flipping through the emails. My sense, not many of them said anything about seasonal versus year-round. My sense in talking to people has been people would want a year-round restaurant, but that's only anecdotal evidence.
Well,
It is not
the-
hard data.
Just 1 minute. The restaurant RFP provided for either, and the other responder indicated that he would like to start as a seasonal and gradually increase if business was successful. So any new RFP would basically provide the same thing, and I don't know that we want to demand that it be year-round, or demand that it only be seasonal, or give the option. But right now,
I don't know that
there's
we
nothing.
demand
They're right
anything,
now, well,
just that we, I think just part of what I'm saying is understanding how residents, not just the residents of Rye, but the people that go to the park and the people that go to
Well-
Seaside Johnny's, whether or not residents, that's one side of it. The other side is whether or not there's bidders that would bid on a
we have no idea
year-round.
that anybody's going to bid on anything.
No, so that's why I'm suggesting that we
so-
hire someone to help us figure that out.
Mr. Chernin,
Hi, I would just like to address.
introduce yourself, please.
Sam Chernin, I'm one of the owners of Seaside Johnny's. I would just like to say that I am been in this business for 50 years, okay? And I am also a consultant, a restaurant consultant. And in 50 years in business, we might be a small business, but I could say this publicly, we've done over $1 billion, not $1 million, $1 billion in restaurant revenue in our career. So we know a little bit about the business. And I'm not going to address personalities and people that are in restaurant business. I just want to say one thing. As far as if someone came to me and said to me as a consultant, what about this location as an all-year-round venue? I want to tell you categorically it would not work. Don't you think that if we thought that we could generate revenue there, we would? We have the infrastructure, we have the plant, all we'd have to do is keep it open. We would lose money from October until April every single week. In the first 2 or 3 years we were there, we tried to stay open. We tried to serve breakfast, and people would come. 2 or 3 Rye residents would show up with the paper and sit there all day, and we would lose money every day. So you could dream about having an all-year-round restaurant there. The situation with the parking in the winter and the ice, having to walk from the parking lot to the restaurant is treacherous, and especially if there's not good maintenance with ice and storms. It just doesn't work. In City Island, same thing. The restaurants on the end of City Island do nothing in the winter. People do not go to certain locations in the winter. It's just a mindset. And I wish it was different. So you could say, I know you'd love to have a lovely 100-seat fine restaurant there, but that's not what that location requires. It's not what would support that location. And it's just pipe dream to think that you could stay open all year. And that's, I don't want to get into all kinds of other things that I heard today. It's certainly insulting for us to sit here after 17 years in that location, and what we've put into the park in public service and in serving the public and rebuilding those pavilions. I know everybody here doesn't know the true story. We went into that restaurant, it was a disaster. We put millions of dollars in that place over a period of 17 years, money that was never documented as far as telling the commission, oh, we just made changing equipment. After Sandy, we put $400,000 to get the place open the following year. Nobody knows about that. So, I'm very upset, honestly, about character assassination. I'm very proud of my career. I'm very proud of what I've done. I'm a Harvard-educated restaurateur, and I'm very, very upset that people are judging who have no knowledge of what went on in that location for 17 years. And my partner, John Ambrose, did for the public. with events that cost us money with no recourse, no profit coming back to us, just public service. And I'll be honest with you, the stuff that I wouldn't have done, he did. That's the kind of person he is. He's a fine man, and he's a very good operator, and he has a great loyal clientele who really, really love him. And if he's not at that location, fine. But you will really be losing a fine person, and it's a fine restaurant, and I go in there, and it's full of happy, satisfied customers. And I know there are certain people that live in Rye that wouldn't patronize that place if we gave them the food for nothing. And that is not our core clientele. 65% of our clientele to 75% do not come from the general area of the park. And if we had to depend on the clientele in the general area of the park, we would have closed up the first year. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hate to make this a revolving, so I'll make this. I appreciate the gentleman's concern for everyone's safety with walking around the park. But the only thing I would add is that, again, this is not a character assassination. This is a money-making enterprise. And unfortunately, the city and the commission is involved in making money from taxes as well. With respect to a year, I couldn't disagree more. I think it should be mandated. Other restaurants can do this. And again, my polling is not scientific. I don't know that any polling is. But the fact of the matter is we haven't tried. And it hasn't been that way in a long time. And maybe generations turn over, maybe folks change heart, change opinion. Every single house I go to in the city of, village of, town of, in this area is wholly on board with that. The reality is, it's not the proprietor's decision. It's the commission's decision to let another proprietor to take that risk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Would you entertain a motion to table this resolution? Or do you have to see this resolution through? As
Do
far
I
as
hear a
voting.
motion to table?
I mean, on the Robert's rules, does the resolution have to be voted on if it was a second, Paul?
Well, a motion to table is not debatable, first of all. And then secondly,
The current motion.
I'm not sure tabling is the right approach yet. I think
We could
I think-
withdraw the motion.
you can withdraw the motion, but I'm sensing that there was a desire to do a restaurant consultant. And I think, step one would be a decision to retain a restaurant consultant. And I think that if you're going to rebid this, which I'm sensing is the sense of the commission, that would be step one.
We have a current resolution.
Yeah,
the
that
current
he could
motion is
withdraw
gonna be
that.
Withdrawn, okay.
Otherwise, you can table it, in which case you'd need a majority to take it off the table. But a motion to table, if seconded, is not debatable.
Well, can I just raise a point, which is, it seems like most, if not all of us up here are maybe coming to the realization that there may not be enough time to do what we want to do, and get, if it ends up being a new person, and get that new person in there for the next season.
It's not going to happen.
Well, okay. I mean, you're speaking with more certitude than I'm saying, but I don't know the answer. But it sounds like that if that is true, then I think what we need to do probably is attempt to get a one-year extension. So it seems to me we need to know whether that's in the cards or not. Because if it's not, then, although it's not a choice we would want to make to have it empty, it's being made for us. But if it can be done, I think that we all would probably give serious consideration to it, given everything that's been said here tonight.
Well, I think as a policy consideration, what you've said is correct. You have to really make a determination and work backwards. Would you want this area to be vacant over the summer? I mean, I personally think it's an amenity of the park, whoever runs it. It's an amenity. I think that there are patrons, either inside or out,
Please.
inside or outside, who would want to.
We're operating with absolutes that have no basis.
Excuse me,
Excuse me.
the commissioner is speaking.
Wait, can I speak again?
After I speak,
After
or
the
when
commissioner,
chair
or
gives-
after
or when
the
chair gives
other,
permission.
after the other commissioners speak.
Take notes on absolutes that we're working with. Go ahead.
But I want to, from my point of view, I think it's essential that you have an amenity in the park. I think that it's, all in all, whatever people think it's good to have a restaurant there. But Joe, you had mentioned with Whitby Castle that you had a restaurant consultant and then legal counsel, and just what was the process? I mean, I'm working backwards as an attorney, knowing how long these things take.
Yeah, so how long did it take? It took,
But we were also, I mean, I was on the task force, we spent a long time, so I can't say that I remember, but we spent a long time figuring out what we were doing with the entire golf club. And then at some point came to the realization that we were just going to do an RFP for the restaurant. And at this point, I'm kind of forgetting from that
it took
to
at
the
least 6
finish
months.
line.
It took at least 6 months. And what we did, by the way, if my recollection serves, is that once we got these 6 applications, we met with all of them, or most of them, the top ones. And we didn't engage in negotiation, but we would say, hey, I know your proposal says this, but, knowing that someone else had proposed something else, would you be willing to do this?
Well, that's the standard, right.
So, competition, I don't think that we should foreclose, despite strong opinions that have been suggested, that Mr. Ambrose won't be there next year or in the future. But I think what the public wants is an ability to play a role in saying, this is what we want, and then trying to get it. For instance, you talked about keeping it open year-round, and I don't know whether it can be sustained or not, but, the business people will tell us that. The people who submit their proposals will tell us whether it is fiscally viable, because even at Whitby Castle, the membership, in this case it would be the wider public, told us, well, we want the restaurant to be open for players coming off the golf course on the 18th hole, at certain times of day. And most people told us, including the one that we eventually awarded it to, said, it's not really a moneymaker for us. There's not enough people that are going to, want to be served. I mean, they say they want, but there's not going to be enough to make it worth our while. So we'll do it if you asked us to do it, but then it will also cut into how much money we're going to pay you. So, if we're going to pay you, $100, just using a small number, but you want us to stay open, on the 18th hole, or in this case, for a longer period of time during other seasons, we're not going to give you $100 anymore. Now we're going to give you $90 or something less. So I think it's all part of the negotiation. I think, we have to decide what we want there, and then we have to see if someone is willing to give it to us. But that's part of the whole process that I think we have to go through.
That's a standard RFP process, and I agree 100% with you, Joe, that once the RFPs are in, then you can start to talk to each of the proposers and get the best situation for the community. But right now, what we have before us is the question as to, I assume that the feeling of the commission is to rebid, but the question is, what action should be taken with respect to the end of the Seaside Johnny's license on 12/31/16. So I'm happy, as counsel said, we're not going to negotiate in public. However, if the commission so desires, we can meet with Mr. Ambrose, or one or two of us can meet with Mr. Ambrose and find out exactly what his intentions would be regarding that proposal.
I think there's another member of the public, Gary, that wants to step forward.
Yes, sir.
My name is Richard Runis. I can give you some of the history of Seaside Johnny's and Rye Town Park.
Your address, please.
3 Kirby Lane North in Rye, City of Rye. There were originally, I believe, 3 responders to the original RFP when Seaside Johnny's was the successful responder. They outbid 2 other restaurateurs from the area. You're in the middle of a pickle because not only of timing, but the time that it takes to construct a restaurant, whoever is the successful responder. So my recommendation is the most you can give anybody without an act of the legislature in this situation is 3 years. If you want to give them more than 3 years, you want to give them 10 or 15 years, requires an act of the legislature and what are called home rule messages. Those are actions taken by local councils, like the Rye City Council, which it does from time to time, which are communicated to the state legislature, and all of the communities that are constituent members of this commission would have to pass those home rule messages before the senator and the assemblyman would be able to move the bills. So what I think you ought to do is sit down with the principals from Seaside Johnny's, negotiate a 1, 2, or 3 year extension, whatever they're willing to do and you're willing to do. Take those 2 or 3 years and put out a new RFP, hire whatever consultants you are. Maybe this gentleman over there who owns 2 restaurants in the West Side will pony some money up and open the restaurant and personally guarantee that he'll keep it open 12 months a year. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But you don't have any other choices, because the one choice I don't think you have is for that restaurant not to be open next summer.
Yep.
And not just for financial reasons. What do you think is going to happen on that beach if there's no place for someone to buy a soda, a beer, or a hot dog, or a hamburger? People are going to be lugging those things onto that beach, who you will have no control over. And you don't know the consequences of those actions. So I recommend you appoint a subcommittee to meet with these gentlemen, negotiate as long or as short as an extension as they and you will agree to, and then go do what you want to do and have the time and the leisure to do it. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. That's kind of where I was heading when I suggested that our resolution states that the Park Commission selects Seaside Johnny's to be the licensee, but the resolution that is proposed does not contain a time frame for the license, and we could amend that to simply say, to reach an agreement with Seaside Johnny's for a new license not to exceed 3 years. And of course, we could negotiate a shorter time. And we could also retain special counsel to do that negotiation. During that period of time, we can go out to bid. We can retain the consultant that Mayor Sack and Councilwoman Killian suggest to prepare a new bid package and go forward from there. Of course, there's nothing that says that Seaside Johnny's would want to enter into any negotiations, but then again, they may wish to.
We have another speaker.
Yes, ma'am. That's a familiar face.
Good afternoon or good evening. Laura Brett, 661 Milton Road, Rye, former member of the Rye-Town Park Commission. I don't envy all of you sitting up there today, but the one thing I want to echo that you've heard from a few people, and I've heard from a few of you up there, is that you should not feel pressured to make a decision tonight. This lease doesn't expire today. It doesn't expire at the end of this month. You have 2 more regularly scheduled meetings to decide what to do. I know when the City of Rye looked at what to do with Whitby Castle, I think it was a 6-month process, and that we got a new operator in there within that 6 months. We had events that they were going to need to operate in the spring, and we were still interviewing bidders in the spring. So, you know, there's no reason to assume that you can't get a restaurant operator in there before next summer. And I think it's worth stepping back, having some sideline conversations among yourselves to figure out where you want to go with this, whether you want a 1-year lease with Mr. Ambrose, who, you know, we all should acknowledge the fact that what he's done with the restaurant in that park is leaps and bounds above what was there before, which was, I think it was called the Sandbar. The Sandbar. And I was at the Sandbar with my kids when they were little, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, somebody should really do something with this place. And I think we all feel that way about the park now, is that, this is a restaurant that people have enjoyed for many years, but is there something more? And I know that's what the commission is thinking. Is there something more? Is there something better that we can do to serve the community? So don't feel pressured to the end of the meeting tonight to decide what to do next. You have time. It's not urgent. You should think about whether or not you can get an operator in there for next year, whether or not you want a lease extension and the length of lease extension that you might want to offer to Mr. Ambrose before you ask him what he's willing to accept. I mean, your mission, your goals for the park should be what you're pursuing here. And I think you've heard a lot of feedback tonight and have a lot of things to consider. So my recommendation to all of you, and I've been in your shoes, is to not feel pressured by the time here and take your time to make the right decision for the park.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioners?
Yeah, I just want to say, you seem to be proposing that you wanted to, maybe not after what Laura said, but wanted to do this resolution. I just want to bring up again, my earlier question is, I would like to understand the implications of extending the license or effectively choosing Seaside Johnny's as the winner of the RFP and negotiating a new license. So I personally cannot make a decision until I really understand what the difference between those two things is.
I don't think there's much of a difference. We still
not
need,
in a-
the commission would still need a resolution to go forward to negotiate an extension of the license. There may be terms in the license that exist today that the commission does not wish to continue, even in a one-year extension. There may be terms that the commission may wish to impose on a one-year license that do not exist today. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure that the commission would not want to extend the license exactly as it is. But
The only way, Laura, Brett, that I would feel a little bit more pressure maybe than we did with Whitby Castle is the extent of the renovations that may or may not be necessary by a new operator, if it is a new operator. If it's still Mr. Ambrose, it, obviously probably wouldn't be as big of a deal, if any deal, but I do think that even the one applicant or the proposer who withdrew, I think had some pretty extensive things that he wanted to do.
yeah, that's one reason that he withdrew.
So I appreciate the suggestion to take a deep breath and not be rushed into it tonight per se, but I think we do need to do it pretty soon, whatever it is we decide to do.
I actually agree with that, Joe, because even this resolution, even if it was adopted the way it is tonight, I'm not saying it should be, even it provides the fact that you're going out to bid to get special counsel. So therefore, that in itself would take time, and you'd have to come back. What I'm saying
yeah.
is the whole process is delayed. I personally don't think that if you even started the process again, you could have anyone in there, a new person in there, because of the timing to do all of this.
I don't think you have to put attorney services out to bid, and if you were all willing to hire the guy that we used.
But a restaurant consultant, you perhaps, or you may want to consider that. I personally think that, based upon past practice, you don't have a whole lot of time, even though it's almost towards the end of September. You're really talking about 7 months away, which is a very, very short. So I think you have two alternatives. You could either try to sit down, as was said before, or you accept the proposal. Those are the two alternatives at this point in time. But I also think that there has to be a greater dialogue with the community just in general. I served on this commission for 5 years, and I'm shocked, and I'll say that. For the first time today in a conversation with a member of the community of the city of Rye, I heard that there was an appetite to have a restaurant there for 12 months, which really went against everything I would have thought. That never came up in the 5 years I served on this commission, and I was really quite surprised because of the different changes over the years that took place, was to be able to restrict parking and better traffic flow, all the things that have been improved because of the input of the residents of the city of Rye. I think there are lots of different policy issues and considerations that really need to be discussed in a public context.
Excuse me, can I say something?
Sure.
My name is Vito LaRusso. I live at 9 Water's Edge in Rye. Now, I'm president of the Homeowners Association of Water's Edge. We have 76 units, and I don't think there's any units as close as ours. My unit is right on the circle, so I'm right across from the pavilion and, the beach and the pool. Now, the residents of Water's Edge do not wish to have a year-round restaurant. Seaside Johnny's done a good job. I have no problems. I'm right across from the pavilion. As long as they don't go past 10 o'clock, I don't have a problem with that. If I like the music, I sit outside. If I don't, I go in and close the door. But the residents of Water's Edge, and that's the reason I'm here tonight, are really in favor of, they say, well, the summertime we put up with it, but then after October, it's nice and quiet. So, and there's 76 units there. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. What is the pleasure of the commission?
Gary, a quick question. The RFP indicated that the commission would consider a 10-year agreement, is that correct?
Would consider, yeah.
Would consider. So
I don't-
there's a problem with that, right? I mean, we know that we can't do that. So I would be in favor of just throwing out, not accepting any of the RFPs, and having the current, if they so choose, the current leasee make a request for an extension, as he normally would do, and we would vacate, we would start over. The language in there represents a 10-year agreement, which we don't have the authority to do, and there might have been other bidders out there that were at a disadvantage who, maybe they didn't want 10 years, I mean, who wouldn't? I'm just saying that, my opinion is, hearing what I'm hearing, we don't have to accept just one proposal, we can reject the proposals, one already withdrew, and have, and the current tenant is more than capable of making a request for an extension, and we'll negotiate from that point. We don't need this resolution to negotiate with Seaside Johnny's. And then we would start over with,
All
the
right.
process. That's just my opinion.
Anybody else? Louis? Anything?
I kind of agree with it. I mean, I'm just covered from Mayor Peel is not here today. The way I see and I hear the public, I hear you guys here. I don't understand why we can't increase or extend this lease. The gentleman, I don't even know the owner. They've been in business there for 17 years. I mean, let's have the private, you know what I mean? They just, listen, you want to extend the lease? I mean, let's give him the first choice. My personal opinion. I mean, he's been with us for 17 years. It's not like they just came yesterday or the day before. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I mean, I didn't hear any complaints. I mean, a couple of complaints, like you say, back and forth, but at least let's give him the opportunity and make him extend the lease, my opinion, for 2 or 3 years tops, then we'll move from there forward. That's my personal opinion. You can't just close the door. For a customer who been with us for 17 years, I mean, if he was doing something wrong, we should have thrown him a long time ago.
I know that we're
Just
hearing,
that's my personal opinion.
we're hearing
I
3
mean-
years. Sorry, Louis.
Sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
I know that 3 years is the most we could do
Sure.
without a special act of the legislature, but I'm not sure if it's what we want to do. I think there's at least some argument that we should just proceed straight to new RFP right now. I think what we're also talking about is, let's see if someone, maybe it's Mr. Noto, between now and the next meeting, can have a conversation with Mr. Ambrose and Mr. Chernin and see if, a 1 year is something that they'd be willing to do. And hopefully they can tell us pretty quickly whether we should go pound sand or whether they're amenable. And if they're amenable, then, maybe we can start the process in motion of having something to vote on at the next commission meeting where we might approve that. But if not, if Mr. Noto, you're the one that does it and you get the sense that that's not the way it's going to play out, then I think we should start the transition even before the next meeting to Plan B. And Plan B is, lining something up for the next meeting where we can actually, reissue an RFP or hire a consultant so that we can issue an RFP at the meeting after that, maybe. So we need to, I think, have some action between tonight and the next meeting. So as Laura Brett said, things need to happen, offline, okay? So if, you know, and I don't want to preordain the vote even on a one-year extension, but it sounds like that would relieve a lot of pressure and still allow us to do what we want to do with maybe reissuing it. So
We're not, Joe, we're not limited to a one-year extension either. We're limited to a maximum of 3, but we can't even talk about a 2, which would give us time. But we don't have to make that decision tonight. We could discuss it. And I agree, and I think Paul is the right person to approach Mr. Chernin, Mr. Ambrose.
Well, I think at the next meeting, and when is the next meeting? It's October what? Debbie, do you know?
18th?
September,
Yeah, it's
October 18th. So between now and October 18th, you know, there needs to be an item on the agenda at the October 18th meeting, either to approve a short-term extension or to hire a restaurant consultant to assist us immediately in moving forward with the.
Or both?
What not-
Or
yeah,
both.
what about both?
Or both.
Or-
We'd have both.
Or both, but I think we need, I don't see why we couldn't figure out that one is precluded before we move to the other,
Well, I
but,
think the first item is to have Mr. Noter talk to Mr. Ambrose and Mr. Chernin and see where their mind is in all of this. And we can have discussions certainly offline as to which direction we should go in.
I think we-
Benny, do you want to withdraw your motion?
I didn't make the motion, Lou made the
Louis
motion.
made the motion?
Louis, you made
I-
the motion.
I was unaware of the
The
motion.
well,
resolution.
I think
Oh,
if I-
resolution.
if I may,
was
Gary,
made.
just to kind of close the thought on this, since things may be not officially decided, but, you know, between now and the next meeting, you know, if you know, at the next meeting, the proposal is a 3-year extension, you know, I think we ought to hear now from members of the public whether that would be palatable, and I suspect that it might not be. So I think we ought to hear a little feedback tonight on 0, 1, 2, or 3 before we start having these offline
That-
discussions.
Wouldn't
I
that be
can't
a
imagine-
basis for a negotiation? That should
Yeah.
be a special session.
And
I can't
also-
imagine Mr. Ambrose would want
Right,
want
exactly.
30
We're not
seconds.
gonna-
It doesn't make
I
sense
would
No.
to
solicit
me.
feedback from the public on those options.
First of all, there's just a handful of people here. If you want to have that dialogue, you should have it where it's noticed, where it can go out to the public.
Yeah.
That type of conversation. I understand the time constraints.
Well, that's
but
what
you
I have in mind,
10
Joe.
You have
I'm
8
just trying
people here.
I'm trying to cut to the chase
Um,
because we don't have a lot of
This
time.
is not representative of the feelings of the people as a whole, not only the city of Rye, but the town of Rye as well.
I think that.
What the
Go ahead, Julie.
I was gonna say, what the emails yesterday and today that we got seem to suggest is they would like us to go through a new RFP process. So by definition, I don't think people are looking for a 3-year lease. And I can't imagine it would make sense from a business perspective for Mr. Ambrose, who put in a proposal that included renovating and whatnot and some changes to what he was doing. So why be in there 3 more years as it is now? So to me,
Actually,
I
we-
can't imagine that for any of the parties. To me, it makes much sense to go beyond
don't-
a year. But I
That's-
will
that's
not
something-
speak for anyone else. I'm
Julie,
just-
I think that's something to be discussed. Certainly, parties in interest, such as the current licensee, may have something to say about that, and that may foreclose any further discussion. I think that the ultimate decision is the commission's, and while I do appreciate all of the emails that came in, 15 or 20 emails do not represent 45,000 people of the town of Rye and 15,000 people of the city of Rye.
There was a lot
I don't,
more than
you know, we don't operate government by email. I think it's very important that the residents let us know their feelings. And as I said at the outset, I think it's really important, and I think that it shows great interest, and I think we all appreciate that. Ultimately, it's our decision to be made, and certainly, long-term, just to get it out there, it's sort of been hinted at, long-term, if we expect any restaurant to make substantial capital investment in that space, they're going to require a longer-term lease than 1, 2, or 3 years. That will require state legislation, as we have said. It will require a home rule message. So therefore, the city of Rye, the town of Rye, the village of Rybrook, and the village of Portchester will all have to agree on what those terms are. And any one of those communities will, in essence, have a veto power. So we will have to be in agreement going forward on what this will be. And basically, I think that's how it should be. So I think that we're not going to act on this resolution. Mr. Marino, would you like to withdraw the resolution at this particular time?
Yes.
Thank you. And we will discuss this next month. We will have discussion offline.
So, Mr. Noto, can you give the commission interim,
Yeah,
updates as soon as
absolutely,
possible
yeah.
after tonight, so that
I
we're...
will, I'm
Thank you.
sure I'll be hearing from Mr. Ambrose, so.
And the only other question.
Sure you will.
The only other question, do we need to act or make a decision on the RFP that was received, whether we want to continue that dialogue or just let it be? I don't know what the legal
No,
process is.
the answer
We
is
gotta-
no, you don't, you
Okay, just
you
let it
don't
be?
have to act,
Okay.
but if you want to, you can reject.
Okay.
Well, I don't think we
Proposal.
need to reject it tonight.
No,
Right, that's what I'm saying, okay.
you don't need to, no.
All right?
Good.
Sounds good.
So,
Motion to adjourn.
no further business being before us. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, so I just wanted to raise one thing that had taken place since, I guess, the last meeting, which is, so the city of Rye received legal papers from a law firm that purports to represent both the town of Rye and the Rye Town Commission, and the papers were a motion to appeal the Appellate Division Second Department's decision in a recent tax cert case. And so that was the first that the city of Rye had heard about it, and certainly we didn't discuss it at the commission level. So, the city of Rye has responded to those papers, but I was a little bit concerned that there was a representation that the Rye Town Park Commission had hired this law firm when in fact that never actually did happen.
First of all, the Rye Town Park Commission did not hire the law firm. The town of Rye hired the law firm. It is intended that the town of Rye will pay for the legal costs of that law firm.
Okay, so I appreciate that, but that's not really the core of the issue. First of all, there was an affidavit that you signed, Gary, that was attached to the moving papers indicating that you gave authority on behalf of both the town of Rye, which you can go ahead and do, but also the Rye Town Park Commission. So I think that is patently inaccurate, and quite frankly, even if you hadn't done that, just to kind of keep the lines of communication open, I think it just would have been common courtesy to let us know that you had taken this action, at least as regard to the town of Rye.
Paul, do you want to talk about the resolutions?
Not particularly, but what I would say is that some of this would probably be best in executive session, because it does pertain to the litigation. As far as, because as your predecessor, and it was part of the commission when we initiated this process. In 2011, the commission did authorize the challenge to the assessment. And this would really, since the case is technically not over until all legal remedies have been exhausted, I don't think the supervisor was beyond his authority to sign that affidavit, but he did not commit the commission to any expenditure of money, which would have required a policy
Yeah.
decision.
I
One of the
think-
issues was, when we originally commenced the proceeding in 2011, I took it on pro bono, I did not get paid. That took it through the Supreme Court decision. After the Supreme Court decision, the city filed its notice of appeal, and then at that point, they perfected the appeal, in which case the town then agreed to pay me to handle the appeal. I don't know that there was any impropriety from a legal standpoint as to him signing that affidavit for the motion. By the way, it's a motion seeking leave to appeal, so we're not even guaranteed an appeal here. We're just asking the
Yeah.
court to permit an
So,
appeal.
Look, there were two decisions that were made, Paul.
Yeah.
One, a decision was made to file the motion. Okay,
Correct.
that decision was not voted on by this commission whatsoever. Secondly, there was a further decision to retain outside counsel and not have you do it anymore. So that, to me, is an even bigger decision.
Well, that was my recommendation,
Well-
that I didn't, that I didn't, it wasn't that they, I suggested they retain other counsel to do that. That was
Okay.
my suggestion, not theirs.
So,
His.
bottom line, both of those decisions required approval by the commission. Neither one of them received approval by the commission, and I think that was a mistake. And I would ask that going forward, things like that not happen again. Unfortunately, it's been a bit of a pattern in practice where decisions are made by one person without the involvement of the rest of the commission, and it shouldn't happen. And that's my point.
Point taken.
Point taken, Joe.
Motion to adjourn?
Let me just say one thing. We are under a limited time frame and could not call a special meeting. As council has said, I had inquired if I had the authority to sign those papers. I was advised by council that indeed I did have such authority, especially since the town of Rye and not the commission was paying the legal bills. So that went forward. What happens in the future, I could not say in terms of what's going to happen with that appeal. That will be up to the court to decide. Motion to adjourn.
May I just say one thing? I think it's clear to say that if you're given leave to appeal, and if it's granted, you'll bring that before the commission.
I think that I would do that at a regular meeting if there's
Right.
if there's time to do
Right.
that.
Well, there's email too, or phone,
Right.
let us know.
Yeah. By the way,
think this
the,
mostly
just to clear the record as well, the commission did authorize me to write a letter to the city of Rye requesting that the exemption be reinstated. I have not received a reply yet, nor an acknowledgement that that was received at all. Thank you.
Well, actually, it was a very helpful letter to our case, because, in fact, we did acknowledge it in our papers that we filed with the court. Essentially, the position put forward by the law firm that you hired is that written consent was never given by the city of Rye. I'm sorry, written consent has been given by the city of Rye, but your papers, your letter indicates that it never has been given. So actually,
Joe, I don't
appreciate the
think we
letter.
should argue the legal points. We disagree with that. And I think that,
Well, I would say, I mean, I think it would be helpful if the city addressed it, because I do think there were some important issues in terms of intermunicipal relations and how the park is governed going forward. So, from the standpoint of educating the commission and knowing going forward how the city wants to handle it, I mean, it might be helpful for the city council to address it, one way or the other, and just because the decision sort of didn't, the only problem with the appellate division decision, it didn't really address the park, it didn't address the restaurant, it just said the park. And that leaves open a lot of latitude, so
You're
I
right,
think,
it
yeah.
does.
So that's what I think.
and that's one reason.
And I think the city of Rye needs to address that, 'cause
Well-
outside the context of litigation, I'm saying.
Yeah, that's outside the context of litigation. Did we have a motion to adjourn?
Two motions.
Two motions. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and thank you, Joan, thank you, Louis. Thank you. And I apologize to the town of Rye, which is having a meeting right now.